The rain fell soft and steady over the Connecticut countryside the night Nathan Cole drove back to the house he had not entered in 8 years. He had told himself it was a practical trip, a final decision about a property that had sat sealed and silent like a wound he had never quite managed to close. His lawyers had been pressing him. The caretaker's reports were piling up. It was time. He told himself this for 3 hours on the road from Manhattan. He did not believe a single word of it. The black Bentley rolled through iron gates and crunched slowly up the gravel path. Nathan sat in the back seat, jaw set, eyes fixed on the house rising out of the fog ahead, stone walls, ivy climbing every surface, dark windows. A house that had once held everything he loved, now just a beautiful, hollow thing. He told his driver to stop at the edge of the path. Then the light came on, upstairs. Second window from the left. A warm amber glow bleeding through curtains Nathan did not recognize. He leaned forward slowly. That house, he said almost to himself, has been empty for 8 years. He stepped out of the car. The front door opened before he reached the porch. A boy stood in the doorway, small, dark-haired, dressed in dinosaur pajamas, staring at Nathan with the fearless curiosity only a child can carry. He tilted his head the way a boy does when something doesn't quite make sense yet, but he's willing to wait it out. "Are you lost, mister?" he asked. Nathan opened his mouth. Nothing came. And then from somewhere deep inside the house, a voice drifted out. Warm, familiar, the kind of voice that should not exist anymore. The kind of voice Nathan Cole had buried alongside a white casket on a gray October morning 8 years ago. "Lucas, baby, who are you talking to?" She appeared in the doorway a moment later. And the world, Nathan's entire carefully constructed, billion-dollar, grief-hardened world, simply stopped. Because Evelyn Martinez was standing right there, alive. In the house he had built for her, looking at him like she had seen a ghost. Except in this story, he was the ghost. Nathan Cole had spent 8 years building an empire on the foundation of a lie. He had mourned. He had grieved. He had learned, painfully and slowly, to breathe without her. But what Evelyn's survival would reveal, and what his mother had done to make it necessary, would break something far more permanent than his heart ever was. Please sit back, relax, as we dive fully into this really remarkable story. Nathan Cole had not always been the kind of man who commanded rooms. At 33, he had been quieter than that, a gifted architect with a modest firm, a generous laugh, and the particular confidence of someone who knows exactly what matters to him and has no interest in pretending otherwise. He dressed well but without performance. He worked hard but came home on time. He had grown up comfortable. His father, Gerald, was a respected federal judge. His mother, Patricia, a woman of old money and newer ambitions. But Nathan had never mistaken comfort for purpose. His purpose, he had decided early, was Evelyn. He had met her at a fundraising dinner he had attended only because his business partner had canceled last minute, and the tickets were non-refundable. She had been working the event, a social worker volunteering for the nonprofit being honored that evening, and she had spilled a full glass of water directly into the lap of a city councilman, and then apologized so sincerely and so completely that the councilman had ended up consoling her. Nathan had watched the whole thing from across the room and laughed for the first time in months. He had found her afterward near the coat check, still mortified, replaying the moment in visible detail. He had introduced himself. She had looked at him with dark, direct eyes and said, "Please tell me you didn't see that," he had said. "I saw the whole thing. It was the best moment of the evening." She had smiled then, not the polished smile of someone performing charm, but the real kind, the kind that starts slow and takes over the whole face, and something in Nathan Cole had quietly and permanently rearranged itself. Her name was Evelyn Martinez. She had grown up in the South Bronx, the daughter of a seamstress mother and a retired schoolteacher father who had filled their small apartment with library books, and the firm belief that a good education was the one thing no one could repossess. She was sharp and warm and honest to a degree that occasionally startled people who were more accustomed to social cushioning. She laughed easily. She argued thoughtfully. She cared about her work with the focused sincerity of someone who had chosen it, not drifted into it. Nathan fell in love with her the way the best things happen, gradually, and then completely. His mother did not approve. Patricia Cole had built her life around a very specific architecture of suitable and unsuitable, and Evelyn Martinez, however lovely, however intelligent, did not fit the blueprint. She was not from the right background. She did not move in the right circles. She worked in social services, which Patricia considered noble in the abstract and impractical in a daughter-in-law. Over dinner one evening, while Evelyn was out of the room, Patricia had leaned across the table and said to her son in the pleasant tone she used for things that were not pleasant at all, "She's a sweet girl, Nathan. But you have to think about the life you're building." Nathan had looked at his mother steadily and said, "I am thinking about it. That's why I'm marrying her." Wedding was held at the Connecticut property, the old stone house with the ivy walls and lavender garden that Nathan's grandfather had built, and which had sat in the family for 3 generations. Evelyn wore a simple ivory dress and carried wildflowers from the garden. Gerald Cole wept quietly in the front row. Patricia wore a pearl necklace and a smile calibrated to look warmer than it was. For 2 years, the house in Connecticut was the happiest place Nathan had ever known. Then came October 14th. He had been in Dubai, a conference that stretched from 7 days to 10. He had called Evelyn every evening. She had sounded tired on those last few calls, tired but warm. She'd mentioned once that she had something to tell him when he got home. He had assumed it was something small, a decision about the garden, a new project at work. He had not pressed her. He would spend years pressing himself about that. The phone call came at 2 in the morning. His mother's voice, measured, controlled, with the particular careful quality of someone who has rehearsed what they are about to say. There had been an accident. On the highway, coming back from a friend's. The car had gone off the road. Evelyn had not survived. Nathan did not remember the flight home. He remembered the funeral, a closed casket, because the accident had made an open one impossible. His mother had explained, her hand on his arm, her voice soft with a grief Nathan would one day understand she had never actually felt. He remembered standing at the graveside in October wind, while the world continued its ordinary spinning around a fixed point of catastrophe. He remembered Gerald holding his shoulder. He remembered Patricia organizing everything, the paperwork, the flowers, the reception afterward with the smooth efficiency of a woman in her element. He did not question any of it. He was 33 years old and his wife was dead, and questioning things required more of him than he had left. So he closed the Connecticut house. And he worked. He worked the way a man works when stillness is the enemy, relentlessly, strategically, without pause. He expanded the architecture firm into real estate development, then into commercial infrastructure, then into technology investment. His grief did not make him reckless. It made him precise. He poured every hour he could not bear to leave empty into the construction of something enormous. By 36, he was worth $100 million. By 38, $1 billion. By 41, he was Nathan Cole of Cole Meridian, a name that appeared in the financial press with the kind of respectful shorthand reserved for men who have built something genuinely significant. He wore charcoal suits and kept his office on the 42nd floor with windows overlooking the full length of Manhattan. He had a driver, a personal attorney, and an assistant named Priya who managed his schedule with the focused precision of an air traffic controller. He also had in the bottom drawer of his desk a photograph, a young woman in a yellow sundress, laughing at something off camera, her dark hair loose in the wind, a half-eaten mango in her hand. The photograph was worn soft at the edges from years of handling. Every October 14th, Nathan Cole canceled his meetings. He did not explain this to anyone. He did not need to. The decision to drive to Connecticut came on a Tuesday afternoon in early October, 3 weeks before the anniversary. His property lawyer had been pressing him for months. The house had sat empty for 8 years, the caretaker maintaining the grounds, the utilities running at minimum, the rooms sealed and untouched. The taxes were considerable. The property had appreciated enormously. Every practical argument pointed toward selling. Nathan had been putting it off for 8 years for reasons he had never examined too closely. That Tuesday afternoon, he told Priya to clear his calendar, told his driver to bring the car around, and got on the road to Connecticut before he could talk himself into staying. He told himself he was going to look at the house one final time. He told himself it was closure. He told himself many things on that 3-hour drive. None of them prepared him for a light in an upstairs window. None of them prepared him for a boy in dinosaur pajamas. And none of them, nothing in 8 years of grief and work and careful survival, prepared him for the sound of Evelyn's voice coming out of the house he had sealed like a tomb. When she appeared in the doorway and their eyes met across 8 years and a porch railing, Nathan Cole, the billionaire, the empire builder, the man who had learned to function without her, felt every careful structure he had constructed inside himself simply give way. Not dramatically, quietly. The way a foundation shifts before anything above it shows the crack, she stepped back from the door. She sent the boy Lucas. She had called him upstairs with the focused calm of a mother who needs 30 seconds to hold something together. And then she looked at Nathan, and she said the 4 words that would begin the unraveling of everything Patricia Cole had spent 8 years protecting. "Please come inside, Nathan." He did. And the storm that had been building for 8 years, silent, patient, gathering its full force just out of sight, finally made landfall. The kitchen of the Connecticut house smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. There were crayon drawings held to the refrigerator with alphabet magnets. A pair of small rain boots by the back door, muddy at the toes. A stack of library books on the counter with a dinosaur bookmark sticking out of the top one. A child's drawing of what appeared to be a very determined superhero taped to the window above the sink. Life. There was life everywhere in this house. The same house Nathan had sealed like a mausoleum 8 years ago was breathing, warm and cluttered, and full of the beautiful ordinary chaos of a child being raised somewhere loved. Nathan stood in the middle of it and did not know where to put his eyes. Evelyn set 2 mugs of tea on the table without asking whether he wanted any. Her movements were calm and deliberate, the movements of a woman who had decided, somewhere between the door and the kitchen, exactly how she was going to hold herself together for this conversation. She sat across from him. He sat across from her, the same table where they had eaten breakfast every Sunday morning they were in Connecticut. The same chairs. The same window overlooking the lavender garden, bare now in October, the stems cut back for winter. 8 years dissolved and solidified at the same time. Nathan looked at his wife, his living wife, and he did not know whether to reach for her or press his hands flat on the table to stop them from shaking, so he did neither. He simply looked at her, the dark hair, the steady eyes, the particular set of her jaw that he had always associated with Evelyn gathering herself to say something true and difficult. He waited. She did not begin where he expected her to. She did not begin with the night she disappeared, or the accident that never happened, or the documents, or the money. She began 3 weeks before all of that in this same kitchen, on a Thursday morning in late September, when Nathan had already been in Dubai for 4 days, and the house had that particular quiet it got when he was away. The quiet Evelyn had never quite gotten used to. She had been making coffee when the car pulled up. A black town car. The kind that idles with a particular confidence, the driver making no move to get out until the passenger is ready, because the passenger is always the kind of person who decides when things happen. Patricia Cole had come alone. She had walked up the path in a charcoal cashmere coat and low heels, and she had knocked on the door with the precise 3-knock rhythm of someone who does not expect to be made to wait. Evelyn had opened the door. They had looked at each other. And Patricia had smiled, the smile Evelyn had spent 2 years learning to read correctly, the one that was warm on the surface and made of stone underneath. "Evelyn, darling, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Do you mind if I come in?" She had not waited for an answer. Patricia had sat at this very table. Evelyn's voice was flat and precise as she said this, the way voices get when they are recounting something they have rehearsed telling themselves many times in the dark. And she had placed a manila envelope on the surface between them. She had not opened it immediately. First she had talked. She had talked about Nathan, about his potential, his talent, the future she had always seen for him. She talked about it the way people talk about something they have a personal claim on, a future they consider partly their own construction. She talked about the firm's early growth, the opportunities beginning to open, the trajectory she could see so clearly from where she stood. And then she had said, pleasantly, almost gently, that Evelyn was not part of that trajectory, not because she was a bad person. Patricia had been very clear about this. Not because she wasn't intelligent or capable or even in her way good for Nathan emotionally, but because the life Patricia had mapped for her son required a particular kind of foundation, connections, background, a name that opened certain doors rather than complicating the approach to them. Evelyn, she explained, was a complication, and Patricia Cole had spent 60 years solving complications. She had pushed the envelope across the table then. Inside was a cashier's check for $2 million. A signed non-disclosure agreement. A new identity documents, a social security number, a rental property in a city she would not name until Evelyn agreed, a bank account already established in the new name, and a list, a single page, typed and neat, of everything Patricia knew about Evelyn's family. Her father's debt from a failed business venture 15 years prior, still technically actionable. Her mother's immigration paperwork, and a specific renewal that had been filed slightly incorrectly in 2009, the kind of error that meant nothing until someone with the right contacts decided it meant something. The name of Evelyn's younger brother, and the details of a sealed juvenile record that Patricia had somehow obtained. Not threatening you, Patricia had said, in the tone of a woman saying precisely that. I'm showing you that I understand your situation completely. And I'm offering you a way to leave it that protects your family and gives you the means to build something new. She had given Evelyn 72 hours to decide. Then she had picked up her handbag and walked back to the town car. And Evelyn had sat at this table, right here, where Nathan was sitting now. And she had stared at the envelope until the coffee went cold. Nathan had not moved. He had not touched his tea. His face had the quality of a man receiving information that is rearranging something structural. Not a single dramatic expression, but a slow, tectonic shift happening somewhere below the surface. Evelyn kept her eyes on the table as she spoke. Not because she couldn't meet his gaze, but because looking at his face while she said these words was something she had decided she could not afford right now. She told him about the 72 hours. How she had tried to reach him in Dubai and been told by the hotel that Mr. Cole was in back-to-back meetings and could not be disturbed. A message, she now understood, that had been arranged. How she had called Nathan's cell phone to voicemail, again and again, the calls going somewhere she could not follow. How she had packed a single bag, told herself it was temporary, just long enough to protect her family, just until she could find another way, and gotten into the car Patricia's people had arranged. She told him about the city, a mid-sized city in the Pacific Northwest where nobody knew her face, a furnished apartment, a new name on the lease, $2 million in an account she did not touch for 8 months because every time she tried, her hands wouldn't cooperate. She told him about the pregnancy test, 6 weeks after she left, a Tuesday morning in a pharmacy she had walked to because she didn't have a car yet. A result she had sat with on the bathroom floor of an apartment that still smelled like someone else's life. She had been carrying Nathan's child when Patricia came to this table. She had not known. The kitchen was absolutely silent except for the rain against the window and the distant sound of Luca's moving around upstairs, small feet crossing the floor above them. The muffled sound of a toy being relocated with great seriousness. Nathan stared at the table. A muscle moved in his jaw once. She knew, he said. His voice was very quiet, the quiet of something compressed to its limit. My mother, when she came here, she knew you might, she didn't care. Evelyn said nothing, she didn't need to, and the accident, he said, the funeral, he stopped, started again. There was a casket, Evelyn, I stood at a graveside. I know, how, it wasn't quite a question. It was a word dropped into water and left to sink. She had contacts, a county office, a private investigator she'd used for years. Evelyn's voice remained steady in the way that costs something. I only found out the details much later. At the time I disappeared. I didn't know she'd told you I was dead until 6 months later. 6 months. I tried to reach you when I found out about Luca's. I wrote letters, Nathan, 6 of them over the first year. I sent them to the firm's address to your personal P.O. box. I never had a personal P.O. box. The words landed between them. Evelyn looked up. Set one up in your name, she said quietly, to intercept anything that might come. Nathan pushed back from the table. He stood. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her, both hands pressed flat on the counter, looking out at the dark garden. The lavender was bare and silver in the rain. He had planted that lavender the summer they moved in because Evelyn had mentioned once, in passing, that she thought lavender was the most optimistic plant in existence, growing in almost any condition. Refusing to be subtle about its color, he had planted an entire border of it. He stood there for a long time. Evelyn waited. She was good at waiting. 8 years had made her very good at it. Finally, he turned around. His face had settled into something she recognized. Not the young man she had married exactly, but the bones of him. The particular expression Nathan Cole wore when he had made a decision, and the decision was irreversible, and he was done with the part where he felt things about it and ready for the part where he acted. I want to meet him, he said. Properly. If you'll allow it. I know I have no right to walk in here and… Nathan, he stopped. Evelyn was looking at him with those steady dark eyes. He asked me once, she said, why his name is Martinez and not Cole. Nathan went very still. I told him that sometimes names carry stories, she said, and that one day when the time was right I'd tell him the whole one. A pause. I think the time is getting close, she said quietly. Something moved across Nathan's face that had no clean name. He nodded once, and upstairs, as if on cue, Lucas's small feet began padding toward the top of the stairs. The following days moved with the careful pace of people handling something fragile. Nathan returned each morning. He did not push. He did not arrive with declarations or demands or the language of a man who had just discovered he had been robbed of years, even though that was precisely what he was and precisely what had happened. He arrived with coffee from the village bakery. He sat at the kitchen table while Lucas ate breakfast and explained, at length and with great authority, the hierarchy of dinosaur power and why the T-Rex was overrated. Nathan listened. He asked questions with complete seriousness. Lucas, who was 7 years old and an excellent judge of whether adults were genuinely interested or merely performing interest, determined within 48 hours that Nathan was the real kind. He showed him his drawings. He showed him his Lego. He showed him, on the third day, the loose floorboard in the upstairs hallway where he kept what he called his important things. A collection that included a smooth blue pebble, a toy compass, 2 foreign coins of uncertain origin, and a drawing of a dragon that Lucas considered his best work to date. Nathan examined each item with the gravity they deserved. That evening, after Lucas was in bed, Evelyn found Nathan sitting on the porch steps in the cold. He had his elbows on his knees and his hands loosely clasped, and he was looking at nothing in particular with the expression of a man doing complicated interior arithmetic. She sat beside him. They didn't speak for a while. He's extraordinary, Nathan said finally. Evelyn agreed. You did that. She shook her head slightly. He did most of it himself. Nathan looked at his hands. 8 years, Evelyn. I know. I want to. He stopped. Reconsidered. I don't want to make promises I can't explain yet. But I need you to know that whatever it takes, whatever needs to happen, I'm not walking away from this. From him. A pause. From any of it. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. I believe you, she said, and she meant it, which surprised her slightly. 8 years was a long time to hold onto faith in a person. Apparently she had managed it anyway. But Nathan Cole was not a man who could sit with injustice and call it resolved. The warmth of those quiet mornings and kitchen table conversations and porch step silences, they mattered. They were real. But underneath them, something else was building. Something that had been building since the moment he stood in that kitchen and understood the full shape of what his mother had done. He had been 33 years old, grieving, alone. And the woman who raised him had engineered every moment of it, had looked at her son standing at a fabricated grave and felt, apparently, that the ends justified the means. Nathan flew to New York on a Thursday. He told Evelyn he had business to handle. She looked at him for a moment with those reading eyes. Be careful, she said. He nodded. He drove directly to the Upper West Side, to his father. Gerald Cole opened the door before Nathan had finished knocking, the door of a man who has been expecting a particular visitor and has spent considerable time deciding what to say when they arrive. He looked at his son's face. He stepped back. "Come in," he said quietly. "I've been waiting for you." Nathan stepped into the hallway and stopped, because on the table beside the door in a neat manila folder with a yellow sticky note on top in Gerald's careful handwriting was a stack of documents. Nathan looked at his father, Gerald Cole, federal judge, retired, a man who had spent 40 years evaluating truth in courtrooms, a man who had, by his own later admission, carried a suspicion for 8 years that he had never pressed hard enough. "Long?" Nathan asked. His voice was very quiet. Gerald looked at his son steadily. "I started collecting these," he said, "3 months after the funeral, when something your mother said didn't match the accident report I'd read." He paused. "I told myself I was wrong, that I was looking for something that wasn't there because grief makes people irrational." Another pause. "I was not wrong." Nathan picked up the folder. He opened it. And what he saw inside, the paper trail his mother had spent 8 years confident no one would ever assemble, turned the last of his grief into something colder and more purposeful. A falsified accident report, filed through a county office, signed off by an official whose name appeared in Patricia Cole's personal financial records 3 months earlier in a transfer that had been disguised as a charitable donation. A death certificate fraudulent, processed through the same network. The paper technically valid. The foundation of it entirely constructed. 6 letter-sized photocopies, Evelyn's handwriting, her words. 6 attempts to reach the husband who never received them because his mother had been collecting his mail. And at the back of the folder, a single page that Gerald had paperclipped separately, as though even he needed a physical barrier between himself and its contents. A signed contract between Patricia Elaine Cole and Evelyn Alina Martinez, $2 million, a new identity. A clause that specified that Evelyn would make no contact with Nathan Cole, his family, his associates, or his legal representatives for a period of no less than 20 years. 20 years. Nathan stared at the number. Lucas was 7. 20 years would have made him 27 before his mother was legally free to tell him his father was alive. The paper shook slightly in Nathan's hand. He set it down carefully. He looked at his father. "She signed this," he said. She was 29 years old," Gerald said quietly. "She was alone and frightened, and your mother had just laid out exactly what she was capable of doing to Evelyn's family. She signed it because she believed she had no other choice." Nathan was silent. "What do you want to do?" Gerald asked. Nathan closed the folder. He set both hands flat on top of it. And when he looked up, the expression on his face was one Gerald Cole had not seen before, not grief, not rage, not the particular blankness of a man in shock. It was something quieter than all of those and somehow more final. "Want her to confess," Nathan said. "Not to a lawyer, not on paper. I want her to sit across from Evelyn and say what she did out loud." Gerald nodded slowly. "And then?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "And then," he said, "we'll see what kind of woman she actually is." Gerald picked up his phone. He dialed a number Nathan did not recognize. The call connected on the second ring. "It's Gerald," his father said. "Yes, it's time." A pause. "Tell her we need to meet, all of us." Another pause, shorter. "No, not at the house. Tell her the gala." He hung up. Nathan stared at him. "Gala," Nathan repeated. "Her charity gala. Dad, there will be 500 people there." Gerald Cole set his phone down on the folder. He looked at his son with the eyes of a man who had spent 40 years in courtrooms understanding that some truths need witnesses. "I know," he said simply. Nathan held his father's gaze. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a door, one that had been sealed for 8 years, bolted shut with grief and loss, and a lie told by a woman who should have loved him better, began slowly to open. But what Nathan did not know, what no one in that Upper West Side brownstone knew yet, was that Patricia Cole had already made a phone call of her own. She had known, from the moment she saw Nathan's car turn up that Connecticut driveway on the security camera alert she still received for a property she had never stopped watching, that this moment was coming. She had spent 8 years preparing for it. And she had one move left, one that would change everything, again. Patricia Cole had always understood one thing above everything else. Power is not about what you have. It is about what other people believe you are capable of. She had built her entire life on that principle, the careful, deliberate construction of an image so formidable, so seamlessly maintained, that people stopped questioning whether the foundation beneath it was solid. They simply assumed it was. Because Patricia Cole did not do things halfway. Because Patricia Cole did not make mistakes. Because Patricia Cole, in 63 years of living, had never once been caught holding something she wasn't supposed to have. Until now. She sat in the drawing room of her Manhattan townhouse the evening after Nathan's car had appeared on her security feed, and she was absolutely still. No tea. No book. No performance of calm for an empty room. Just Patricia, alone with the particular quality of silence that comes when a person is thinking very fast and very carefully and cannot afford to stop. She had known this day existed somewhere in the future. She had simply believed she had more time. What Nathan did not know, what Gerald did not know, was that Patricia had never fully trusted the arrangement to hold forever. $2 million and a legal document could silence a frightened 29-year-old woman. They could not silence time. And so Patricia, with the methodical foresight of a woman who had always sheplayed 3 moves ahead, had prepared. Picked up her phone. She dialed a number she had not used in 4 years. It rang twice. "Mrs. Cole," said the voice on the other end, measured, professional, the voice of a man who was paid to be available and asked very few questions. "Need the contingency," Patricia said, a pause. "Of it, all of it," she confirmed. "And I need it ready before Saturday." She hung up. She sat for another moment in the silence, then she stood, straightened her cardigan, and walked to the kitchen to make tea. Whatever was coming, Patricia Cole would meet it dressed and standing. She had not survived 63 years by meeting things any other way. Nathan did not tell Evelyn about the gala immediately. He drove back to Connecticut on Friday morning and sat at the kitchen table while Lucas showed him a new drawing, an elaborate scene involving what Lucas described as a robot dinosaur who is also secretly a detective. And Nathan examined it with full attention while his mind ran quiet calculations in the background. He waited until Lucas had gone upstairs for his afternoon reading time. Then he told her. Evelyn listened without interrupting. She had that quality she'd always had it of being able to receive difficult information without her face becoming a weather report of her internal experience. She listened the way good counselors listen, completely, without filling the space. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You want me there," she said. It was not quite a question. "Think you need to be," Nathan said carefully. "But I won't ask you to do anything you're not. I'll be there." He looked at her. "Evelyn, Nathan." She met his eyes steadily. "I have been living in the house she tried to erase me from, raising the son she tried to pretend didn't exist for 7 years. I am not afraid of Patricia Cole's charity gala." A pause, the ghost of something that was almost a smile. "I'll need something to wear, though. I've been living in Connecticut for 3 years. My wardrobe is mostly knitwear and rain boots." Nathan looked at her for a moment and laughed, a real one, the kind that comes from the chest. It startled them both slightly. Lucas stayed with Evelyn's neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Acaffer, who had been a quiet, steady presence in their lives for 2 years, and who asked no questions beyond, "Does he need his dinosaur book, or will he manage without it?" He needed the dinosaur book. Mrs. Acaffer was prepared for this. The drive to Manhattan was quiet in the way of people who have said the important things and are now simply moving toward what comes next. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat in a deep forest green dress, simple, long with a structured neckline, her dark hair down, small gold earrings, no other jewelry. She looked like a woman who understood that the most powerful thing she could bring into that ballroom was simply herself, undecorated and unafraid. Nathan drove. At some point, without discussion, Evelyn reached across and put her hand briefly over his on the gear shift. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. He turned his hand over and held hers for a moment. Then the city appeared on the horizon, glittering and indifferent, and they drove. The Meridian Grand Ballroom was everything Patricia's events always were. Crystal chandeliers throwing light in every direction. 500 guests in black tie and evening gowns moving through the warm golden air with the particular ease of people who have attended enough of these events to perform enjoyment fluently. A string quartet in the corner. White floral arrangements the height of a child. The careful choreography of wealth doing what it does best, making itself look effortless. Patricia stood near the entrance in burgundy silk, silver hair swept up, a single strand of diamonds at her throat. She greeted guests with the warm authority of a woman in her natural habitat. She smiled. She laughed at the right moments. She touched arms and remembered names and made each person feel briefly like the most important one in the room. She was magnificent at it. She had been doing it for 40 years. But her eyes, beneath the performance, moved to the entrance every 45 seconds with the precise regularity of a woman waiting for something she has been dreading and has decided to face anyway. Nathan arrived at 8:17. He came through the main entrance without announcement. No drama, no theater. Just Nathan in a black suit, Gerald beside him in charcoal, Diane Walsh 3 steps behind with a leather portfolio under her arm and the expression of a woman who has prepared for every contingency. And Evelyn, the room did not stop. It was not that kind of moment, but something shifted in the air, the particular atmospheric change of an unexpected variable entering a carefully controlled equation. Heads turned. Eyes followed. The low hum of conversation adjusted its frequency almost imperceptibly. Patricia saw them from across the ballroom. The color did not leave her face dramatically. It simply withdrew. Quietly. The way heat leaves a room when a window opens in winter. She did not drop her champagne glass or make a sound. She was far too controlled for that. But the man she had been speaking to noticed that her attention had gone somewhere else entirely. And he turned to look, and saw nothing remarkable, and turned back, and found that Mrs. Cole had excused herself while he was looking. The Cartier suite was just off the main hall, a private room Nathan had reserved 3 days earlier under his company's account, on the basis that he owned the hotel and could do as he pleased with its rooms. The door closed behind the 5 of them: Patricia, Nathan, Gerald, Evelyn, Diane. 5 people and 8 years of damage in a room the size of a generous sitting room, with pale gold walls and a mahogany table and 2 arrangements of white orchids that suddenly seemed extremely beside the point. Patricia did not sit immediately. She stood at the head of the table with her hands loosely clasped and looked at each of them in turn: Nathan, Gerald, Diane, and then, finally, at Evelyn. For a long moment she simply looked at her. Evelyn looked back. Neither woman flinched. Diane Walsh opened the portfolio. She placed documents on the table with the systematic calm of a woman laying out an argument she has already won and is now simply presenting for the record: the falsified accident report, the fraudulent death certificate, the financial transfer to the county official disguised as charitable giving, traceable through 3 shell transactions to Patricia's private account, the 6 intercepted letters in Evelyn's handwriting, and finally, at the center of the table like the keystone of an arch, the signed contract, Patricia's signature, Evelyn's signature. $2 million and 20 years of silence. Patricia looked at the documents. She did not touch them. "My attorney," she began. "Is not here," Nathan said quietly. "This is not a legal proceeding, Mother. You can call your attorney tomorrow. Tonight I am asking you as your son to sit down." A long pause. Patricia sat. It was Gerald who spoke first. Gerald, who had spent 40 years in courtrooms and knew better than anyone in that room the precise weight of words spoken on record versus words spoken in private. Who had spent 8 years carrying a suspicion he had not pressed hard enough. Who had assembled a folder of documents in quiet and patient penance for that failure. "Patricia," he said. His voice was not unkind. It was the voice of a man who had loved a woman for 40 years and was about to say something that would permanently alter what that love looked like. "These documents are real. We both know it. The question now is not what you did. The question is whether you are capable of saying it out loud to the people you did it to." Patricia looked at her husband. Something moved behind her eyes, complicated and swift, like weather passing over open water. She looked at the documents. She looked at Evelyn. And Evelyn, who had driven 3 hours in a forest green dress, who had left her son with the neighbor and his dinosaur book, who had spent 8 years building a life in the ruins of a marriage that had been dismantled by the woman sitting across from her, leaned forward slightly. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "I'm not here to destroy you," Evelyn said. "I want you to understand that first. I'm not here for your money or your reputation or your social calendar." She paused. "I am here because my son is 7 years old and he has his father's hands and he deserves to grow up knowing the truth of who he is and where he comes from. And I am here because I spent 8 years being ashamed of something that was done to me, and I am finished with that." Patricia's jaw moved. "And I need to hear you say it," Evelyn continued. "Not to a judge, to me, what you did, why you did it, out loud in this room with the people you did it to sitting right here." Room was so quiet the string quartet in the ballroom was faintly audible through the walls. Patricia Cole sat with 8 years of construction balanced on the edge of what she said next. The shame was visible now. Not in a collapse, Patricia was not built for collapse, but in the particular stillness of a very controlled person reaching the outer limit of control. The slight tremor in the hand she had clasped on the table. The way she was breathing, measured, deliberate. A person managing themselves with enormous effort. She looked at Nathan, her son, who was looking back at her with an expression that was not rage. Rage would have been easier, but something more devastating. Grief, for her, for what she was, for what she had chosen to be. "I arranged for Evelyn to leave," Patricia said. Her voice was quiet and precise and cost her something visible with every word. "I provided financial incentive, and I made clear what the consequences of refusal would be. I arranged for the falsification of records to ensure Nathan would not search for her. I intercepted correspondence she sent in the months afterward." She stopped. "I told myself it was for him, that I was protecting a future he couldn't see clearly enough to protect himself." Silence. "And now," Nathan said. Patricia looked at her hands. "And now," she said very quietly, "I am sitting in a room with my son who built a life out of grief I manufactured, and a woman I paid to disappear who came back anyway, and a grandchild I have never met." A pause that lasted a long time. "I was wrong. What I did was wrong. And I am—" Her voice caught just once, just briefly, like a stone skipping the surface of water before it sinks. "I am aware that saying so changes very little." Room held the words. Evelyn sat with them. She did not respond immediately. She let the confession exist in the air of the room without immediately doing anything to it, without softening it or hardening it or packaging it into something more manageable. Then she nodded. Once, slowly. The nod of a woman receiving something she needed and has decided is enough for tonight. She pushed back her chair. She stood. And she walked out of the Cartier suite and back into the warm, golden light of the ballroom, where 500 people in black tie continued their evening entirely unaware that something enormous had just shifted in a side room off the main hall. Nathan watched her go, then he looked at his mother. "Your lawyers will hear from Diane on Monday," he said quietly. "There will be consequences. Not the ones you're afraid of. I'm not interested in destroying you publicly. But there will be accountability." He stood. "And Patricia," she looked up. "His name is Lucas," Nathan said. "He is 7 years old. He likes dinosaurs and robot engineering, and he keeps his important things under a loose floorboard." A pause. "Whether you are ever in a position to know him is something that will be decided very slowly and entirely on his terms and his mother's. Not mine, and certainly not yours." He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, he said, and he walked out. Gerald was the last to leave. He stood at the door for a moment. He looked at his wife of 40 years across the table, at the burgundy silk and the diamond strand and the immaculate hair, and the woman inside all of it, who was sitting very still with her hands flat on the table and her eyes fixed on the middle distance. "I should have asked more questions," Gerald said quietly. "8 years ago, I should have pressed harder." Patricia said nothing. "I won't make that mistake again," he said. He left. The door closed. Patricia Cole sat alone at the mahogany table in the Cartier suite while the string quartet played faintly through the wall and 500 guests enjoyed her champagne. She sat for a very long time. The drive back to Connecticut was different from the drive in. Something had been set down. Both of them felt it, the specific lightness of people who have been carrying something for so long that its absence feels almost strange. Not resolution exactly. Resolution would take longer than one evening in a side room, but something had been named, witnessed, placed outside of them and into the air where it could be examined honestly. Evelyn had her head resting against the window, watching the city lights give way to dark highway and then to the tree-lined roads of the countryside. "Do you feel?" Nathan asked. She considered this genuinely. "Like the ground shifted," she said. "But I'm still standing on it." Nathan kept his eyes on the road. "Good," he said quietly. "That's good." Lucas was asleep at Mrs. Ockhaffer's when they arrived, curled on the guest bed with the dinosaur book open on the pillow beside him as though he had fallen asleep mid-page. Evelyn lifted him carefully. He stirred slightly, made a sound of vague protest, and then settled his head against her shoulder with the absolute trust of a sleeping child. Nathan held the doors. He watched Evelyn carry their son across the dark garden and up the porch steps and into the warm house. He stood in the garden for a moment after the door closed. The lavender border was bare and silver in the October cold. He looked at it for a long time. Then he went inside. Patricia Cole did not attend the following season's social calendar. She retained her lawyers. She cooperated not generously but adequately with the accountability process Diane Walsh set in motion. The county official who had filed the falsified paperwork resigned quietly. The private investigator retired. The paper trail was documented and sealed, not for prosecution. Nathan had kept his word about that, but as record, as truth that existed somewhere in writing even if it never appeared in a courtroom. Patricia's world contracted, not dramatically, not publicly, but in the way that worlds contract when the people inside them finally understand the true cost of the architecture. She sent a letter to Evelyn 6 months later. It was 3 paragraphs long. Evelyn read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer. She did not respond, not yet. Perhaps one day. Gerald Cole spent the following Christmas in Connecticut. He arrived with a chest set under one arm and an excessive amount of wrapped presents that he claimed he had not gone overboard with. He had gone considerably overboard. Lucas, who had been told the full truth in the careful, honest, age-appropriate way Evelyn did everything, accepted his grandfather with the open-handed directness of a child who has been raised by a woman who taught him that new people in your life are not threats. They are just stories you haven't heard yet. Within an hour, Lucas had beaten Gerald at chess twice, legitimately, as far as anyone could tell, and declared him pretty good for an old person. Gerald considered this the finest compliment he had ever received. Nathan moved into the Connecticut house in January, not in a rush, not with declarations. He simply came back to the house he had built for love and sealed in grief, and which had, without his knowledge or permission, continued to be a home in his absence. There were logistics. There were lawyers and paperwork and the slow, careful work of rebuilding something that had been forcibly dismantled. There were evenings where old wounds surfaced without warning and needed to be sat with quietly rather than solved. There were mornings where Nathan would stand in the kitchen drinking coffee and watch Lucas eat cereal and feel simultaneously the weight of the years he had lost and the extraordinary luck of being here now. He and Evelyn did not rush. They had learned, at considerable cost, that the things worth having are the things worth taking time with. They chose each other again, deliberately, fully, with complete knowledge of what the world could do to love and the considered decision to try anyway. Lucas, at age 8, attended his first football match with Nathan on the sideline. He was, as Nathan had predicted, extraordinary. He was also extremely vocal about the referee's decisions, which Evelyn said he got from Nathan, and Nathan said he got from Evelyn, and Lucas said he got from himself because he had good instincts. Nobody argued with this. On a Sunday morning in late spring, the lavender coming back purple and insistent along the garden wall, the stone house warm in the new light, Evelyn sat on the porch steps with her coffee and watched Nathan and Lucas in the garden. They were attempting, with great seriousness, to build something structural out of sticks and string. What it was intended to be was unclear. The debate about what it was intended to be was apparently the most interesting part. She watched them. Her son with his father's hands and her stubbornness, and his own particular brand of certainty about the world. Her husband, and he was that again, quietly, officially, on a Thursday morning in March with Gerald and Mrs. Acaffer as witnesses and Lucas as the self-appointed ring-bearer who had taken the responsibility extremely seriously. The lavender moved in the light breeze, the optimistic plant, growing in almost any condition, refusing to be subtle. Evelyn sat on the porch steps and drank her coffee and let the morning be exactly what it was, simple, undecorated, and after everything more than enough. Nathan Cole had built a billion-dollar empire on grief. He had not known until a rainy October evening on a Connecticut gravel path that the thing he had been building toward without knowing it, without being able to name it, was simply this: a boy with a dinosaur book, a woman on a porch with her coffee, a garden that came back every spring. The truth, finally, after 8 years of silence spoken out loud, and two people who had been separated by someone else's fear, choosing with full knowledge of the cost to stay. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that truth, no matter how deep it is buried, has a way of finding the surface, give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Every share helps this story reach someone who might need it. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories about love, betrayal, resilience, and the extraordinary things ordinary people are capable of when the truth finally comes home. See you in the next one.